Hey there. Let me take a sip from my red stripe real quick. Skullheads, I'm Snags.
And I'm old Silky.
And I'm Allen.
And we are rocking a second Beatles episode here. And
Episode
if it
70.
Yeah, and if you're tuning in without listening to the first one, which God knows why you do that in the age of streaming, you go back and listen to the first one. But just in case you're not, quick recap: we got Alan Bailey on here. He is the Snags and Silky Show's resident Beatle expert. This motherfucker, every time we would mention some rare album, what was the record label other than Columbia that put out that first album?
Oh, VJ, yeah. Yeah, I got the
We
VJ
mentioned the VJ release of the first Beatles. He just picks it up and holds it in the webcam for us to see. He's got all these rare albums. This guy is so obsessive about the Beatles. He ranked every single Beatles song in a spreadsheet.
Yes, I
Other
did.
people are off making money in the stock market, and he's at home ranking Beatles songs in a spreadsheet.
Yeah,
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. You know?
Oh no, I'm with Alan. That shit's important.
I'm old enough to just I had to put it all together. You know, I had to figure it out.
I like it.
So before we start, this show is sponsored by Red Stripe. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm drinking some Red Stripe.
Nice.
It's not sponsored. Spotify, don't freak out. We're not sponsored.
This is
what are you drinking?
This is Jack and Coke here in honor of Lemmy.
I just got the Coke.
All right.
That's fine.
Yeah, Alan's snorting lines of Coke.
Snags the jackass, so you get Jack and Coke, you're good, man.
There you go. And I'm doing the Irie Rastafari Haile Selassie or whatever his name is.
H.M. Selassie, something like that.
Haile Selassie.
Yeah. Rastafari.
So episode 2, we're gonna cover 65 to 67. Coming off of last week, they meet Bob Dylan in late 64, and they all crowd into this room to meet Bob Dylan, and at the time Dylan had put out some pretty intense lyrics for songs. Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, Times They Are Changing. These were lyrics that actually said something and weren't your 3-minute love songs that the Beatles were known for. And they had pretty much exhausted that by the end of 64. So, they sit down with Dylan. He turns them on to pot and, pot and LSD. The later, they had been doing speed since the late 50s. So,
and I have to say, the formula that they were employing before they got into pot and acid was the Motorhead formula. It was speed and booze, and that is why they were such a badass fucking basically biker band in Hamburg. Because
they really were, and even though they're 3-minute love songs, they're like right out of the chute, buzzsaw.
It's no bullshit.
Lyrics, the staccato, the pacing, Little Richard's influence. They, for lack of a better word, they really were the heavy metal at the time. Because you were surrounded by, Tom Jones and, it just, they couldn't help but rock. I mean, I think John's anger really pushed them along. And
so now they're transitioning from the Motorhead formula to a more Bob Dylan influence. Why don't you pick up there with that? Before I interrupted you.
So they, that pot LSD, like you said, would strongly influenced the rest of their careers. 65, the touring madness, the Beatlemania is in full force. The Beatles spent the first half of 65 ping-ponging between the movie studio and the recording studio, and then nonstop radio and TV appearances, all pushing Ticket to Ride was the new single, and also to push the Help movie. Very little else in 65. That August, they did meet Elvis, August 27th of 65. They had interacted with Colonel Parker for probably 2 years, and Parker would show up instead of Elvis, and he'd have like a bunch of gifts for each of them, and they were like, what the hell, we just want to meet Elvis. And I feel like they might have been a threat to Elvis.
Oh, totally. Fucking, that's not a guess.
Yeah.
They were definitely a threat to Elvis.
Yeah, and really, you look at Elvis in 64, he's doing these formulaic, we got to win this race movies, and he had not really had any kind of substantial song since he'd come back from the army and his mom dying and everything.
When they met him, he mentioned that he was thinking about getting back into releasing rock and roll songs like he used to, and when he said that, John, being the smartass that he is, said, "Oh, cool, then maybe we'll start listening to you again."
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
So that kind of
that could be nervousness of you're lashing out at your hero, or I don't know, but that's
just John's acerbic wit, but it did kind of sit with Elvis a little bit the wrong way, and
Hey, that's good though. I mean, it took him another 5 years to do it, but
he eventually did it. Yeah.
Yeah, that shit in 69 at Stax and the American recording studio.
Yeah. He did. He went back to it. But Alan, you were about to say something.
No, yeah, I think he was speaking on behalf of them all. They were all kind of, like, what the hell are you doing, Elvis?
Like, it's hard not to meet him in 64 and be like, dude, right. What are you doing?
Yeah.
So do you want to go into the Help album, Alan? I did watch the Help movie today, and we kind of mentioned it in last week that it is kind of a step down. It's almost as if with the discovery of pot that they're just a bunch of stoned out guys.
That's the problem with the hippie ethos is for every easy rider, there's a movie where people just got stoned and started filming.
Yeah, and with that, I think they were like, it was like herding cats on the set. Like they're just and you watch the scenes, and apart from the other actors, the Beatles are just kind of like, this is the scene where my sleeves get ripped off in the air.
I'll say one more thing, then I think we should let Alan run with it. But my last thought on this is, it's like when we were talking about David Lynch in the Killing Sacred Cows episode. You start to believe your own hype, right?
I don't think they were that far. I don't think it was a cognizant thought. I think they just the Beatles.
Richard Lester is the same director that did Hard Day's Night.
Yeah.
That movie was amazing. It got all kinds of accolades, and I think
it's almost like a documentary, Hard Day's Night, whereas this was really just a vehicle to, hey, let's have the Beatles sing this song, and then we'll have them do this. And then it also became we've never been skiing, so let's get a shot of them skiing. We've never been to
and there's an Austin Powers plot with the evil bad guys. But like I was trying to finish my thought before,
James Bond
Richard Lester and the Beatles, I think both started to believe their own hype and, we're geniuses. We'll just do whatever we want and it'll be brilliant. But I want to let Alan talk about, let's just let's both be quiet and let Alan talk about.
Good luck with that.
Go
ahead, Alan.
It's really hard. And let Alan talk about Help.
Jesus Christ.
The Help the album and Help the movie.
Help the okay. So the movie, as long as you were just talking about it, I don't disagree with anything you said there. Although I love the movie. I think it's just a rip. It
was entertaining.
It's actually, it does have, a plot, and it's more like a long form kind of a video. It's one video after another, right? There's that they show them playing this song in the studio. They show them playing a song in a minefield, or wherever they are outside, and then skiing. Exactly. Ticket to Ride is skiing. It was the first Beatles movie I saw. I did not see Hard Day's Night first. I saw Help, I think, in 1978 when I was 12 years old, and ate it up. I just loved it. It's the first time he's in it, it's the Beatles. It was great.
It's a great way to see them, and you didn't have YouTube and all that. So these kids would sit there in the movie theater, and they didn't care. Same with Elvis. It didn't matter what they were doing.
Yes, that's right. It was closer to an Elvis movie. You're right. There it is.
That was my take.
Right.
Today, watching it.
So what else? What else did you think about Help the movie, Alan? Any other thoughts?
Well, that's just because I've been researching and studying. I know that's the first time that George ran into Indian musical instruments. There was a scene in an Indian restaurant, and there was Indian musicians playing there, and that started him down that road with Ravi Shankar and all of that. So that's what I take away from Help. I guess that's the best thing I can think of. But it is just if you just want to be mildly amused, it's nice little Beatles movie.
What do you think about the album?
The album, I assume we're talking the UK album with just the songs.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Help is one of my favorite Beatles songs. So right away, I love that, and it's got You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, which is John's first kind of a Dylan style song.
Total Dylan influence.
And that's the
vocal.
That might be my favorite song in the film as far as what's going on. They're all in that one house where they enter through separate doors.
Yeah.
But they're all in the same house. And then there's the sunken in thing where Paul sleeps or whatever. And then, they're playing that song. That's a really cool scene, I thought. I with all the songs on it, I would give it maybe a B+. It's got Yesterday, which is, the monumental Paul song. I think Yesterday and Ticket to Ride are like Paul and John pretty much going after the same thing. They both they're losing somebody.
Oh yeah.
Paul came out on top. Obviously.
If I had to only listen to one of those songs for the rest of my life, it would be Ticket to Ride. But Yesterday was the bigger hit for sure.
Yeah, a little bit. Right. After that, just some. I mean, they're all good. Again, what don't I like here? But I would give it probably a B+ with this album.
Yeah, I liked George Harrison's "I Need You" on here is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Another Girl is good. But this is a great album.
Some of those Beatles deep cuts are just fucking awesome. You know.
Yeah. I've Just Seen a Face is so good. And Ringo covering Act Naturally.
Oh, Buck Owens. Yeah.
Yeah, Buck Owens. But the in the book that I'm reading that's called The Beatles, they mentioned somebody else having a hit with Act Naturally, and that Ringo is covering that, but I always think of Buck Owens, like you said.
Oh yeah.
So Ringo's covering the David Lee Roth version?
Yeah, basically. I believe it's Buck Owens. I don't know who that other group was, but anyway, so anything else on Help with the soundtrack or the movie?
I do have the soundtrack album on vinyl, which is cool because it's got the instrumental stuff.
Yeah, and growing up, I liked the instrumentals that were with Hard Day's Night and Help.
Right.
I liked having those soundtracks
Yep.
Separate from the British versions. But,
well, right. And when I was growing up, that's all you could get. I couldn't, if you had a little more, a little bit more money, you could buy the import. But, I never did. I just bought what was, available here. So I got all the US stuff.
There's a great box set. I'm sure you've seen it. It's the US albums.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the only way you can officially get some of those, those soundtracks that way.
Yes, right. I borrowed, I took those out of a library and burned them all, ripped them all, whatever.
Oh, there you go.
I thought you were going to say, I took those out of a library and never brought them back.
Oh, I brought them back.
No, but what a great way to get them and copy them, and then you have them.
That was perfect. Because they released it in both a mono set and a stereo set.
Yeah, I have the mono, and they do sound. If you have a good stereo, they're almost different takes or something. They're very different from what you're used to hearing. So it's interesting to hear them that way.
Yep.
So all right, so Help comes out, completely different style of song. Like I said before, they'd exhausted the 3-minute pop song, and then in England, the BBC really decided what was played on the airwaves. So east of Essex and Kent, a fleet of ships would moor off the coast, just outside that 12-mile international waters limit, and they had pirate radio. So
there's a movie about that. I forget the name of it. Yeah.
Well, Radio Caroline or Radio London were two of the more well-known or listened to pirate radio, and what you had, like, teenage life was no longer this spastic phase, a brief flirtation with Elvis or the bad stuff, and then you got a job and went on. I really think with the Beatles, this became a separate society, a new way of life, a new style that has not changed. They really, and then it's almost like full circle. I was thinking the scene that the Beatles had inadvertently influenced, they were now influenced by this same scene.
The other thing with the Beatles too is, unlike their predecessors, they started commanding respect of, like, the musical establishment. I remember when I was in middle school and we had this really nerdy math teacher, and somehow the subject of rock and roll came up, and he was like, I don't like rock and roll, I only like classical music. And then he said, except for the Beatles. And I think there's this they established rock and roll as a true art form, I think. And I was respected by the establishment.
I think George Martin had a lot to do with that.
Absolutely.
To have him in your back pocket with orchestra at the ready.
Yeah, because they would come to him with some, he had to interpret what they were trying to get, and they would explain it, and then he would come in with the full production, or let's put a violin here, and it gave them that notoriety. In '66, there was a show.
I want to real quick though, Alan. Do you have any more thoughts on George Martin?
At this point of the game, they started to come to him with more ideas and stuff now. At this point, again, away from the 3-minute, pop songs, just like you said, he would, put the finishing touches on, do what needed to be done to produce it well. And he would more or less guide them through the process. And now they were taking more of the initiative at this point, because now they're working on Rubber Soul, right? Where we are.
Well, they're getting up to that. So swinging London, California's halcyon debauchery would just feed their hedonism, and they were like kings of the whole, music scene.
Totally.
They were very influenced, I think, by the music that was coming out. And again, these all, a slew of artists are influenced by the Beatles, but the Beatles are hearing what they're doing, and it's just becoming a back and forth, almost like passing the guitar to them. They play something, hurdy-gurdy man, or something the Beach Boys do.
Aside, now the Beach Boys definitely influenced the Beatles. Like early on, there was they were considered competition to the Beatles, and there was this whole kind of back and forth of who has the best harmonies. The Stones, I think, the Beatles respected them and maybe influenced them. That you can see that influence coming later, I think, when they come back to the more rock and roll approach. But Beatles, Stones, Dylan. Who else, Alan, do you think influenced the Beatles?
The Byrds.
Really?
Especially George. Yeah, George got a lot of Roger McGuinn.
Yeah, when they were hanging in California, they were hanging with Peter Fonda. All the Byrds were coming out. It was like a whole scene.
Yeah. So say more about the musical influence of the Byrds, Alan.
Well, it was really kind of George's influence. George got the 12-string guitar for the first time after he heard the Byrds. Roger McGuinn. I mean, Roger McGuinn was Mr. 12-string. I can't imagine playing a 12-string guitar, having to deal with 6 strings.
Yeah,
is just enough. But anyway,
it's more of a, aren't you? You've got that pick that's around the thumb, right?
I don't know if that's
12-string guitar is
scrunching.
12-string guitar is for every guitar of the 6 guitar strings, there's a smaller additional guitar string, so your fingers are having to push down, but it gives you this drony kind of rich sound. And I don't know if he played a 12-string on 8 Miles High, but that's the song that has that drony Eastern kind of. That I
well,
think
and
of.
the Byrds had another guitar player. Gene Clark was crazy. He was a beast on the guitar. If I got the right guy.
Yeah. So what did I'm trying to think? When did I think he used it on? Maybe it was not until Revolver, or maybe If I Needed Someone. That might be a 12-string.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
So, 66. There's rumblings about just how chaotic everything has been with touring and the crowds, the media interviewing them. What kind of pants do you wear? Just these lunacy questions. And John is 25 years old. He's irritated with all of it, and he gives this interview in England, and his full quote, I'm going to read this. He says, "Christianity will go. It will vanish and shrink. I needn't argue about that. I'm right, and I'll be proved right. We're more popular than Jesus now. I don't know which will go first, rock and roll or Christianity. Jesus was all right, but his disciples were thick and ordinary. It's them twisting it that ruins it for me." And I actually can
totally agree with that.
Totally agree with just not just Christianity, but anything. That it's not the band, it's the fans that ruin it for me for some bands.
Yeah.
and I feel like that's where he's going. So
I'm
this
not
gets
the Messiah.
Did he?
He
I think
who denies he's the
removed that
Messiah
tweet.
is the true Messiah. Sorry. Go ahead, Alan.
what?
I think he had to remove that tweet, didn't he?
Yeah, canceled by the
No,
the
so
religious nuts went bonkers
he
when that
says
happened.
this. He says this in England, and it just kind of falls to the wayside because the England had the forethought to go, well, it's just a rock star. Who cares what he says? You
Yeah.
know, and that should have been the end of it.
Well, all of their Puritans moved over here.
Right.
That's
So-
why.
Right.
So this was said in April. So in July, this article's picked up in the San Francisco Chronicle. And but before we get to that, they tour in '66. They did Germany, Tokyo, and the Philippines. And when they get to Germany, here comes Astrid. They haven't seen her in 3 or 4 years, and that was cool. Some of the real grungy clubs they played. Some of these bartenders that they knew had shown it, so it was like a real family reunion type thing in Germany, and they did that, and then they go to Budokan, Tokyo, and that was a whole different experience. The culture, very subdued crowds. So there's a great recording of them playing in Tokyo, and there's video too. I think about 8 songs. It's about a half hour, which is what they were playing. But you get to see them, and the recording is pretty damn good because the audience isn't screaming their heads off. So they actually had to actually play in Budokan. But I wanted to get to the Philippines. This was crazy. They get to the Philippines, and their luggage is taken off the plane and left on the runway. And they're told to get in the cars. And they're like, well, we need to get our luggage. And, that's all their pot, all their drugs. And the cops are like, get away from that luggage. And they're, thrown in a limo and driven to a boat. And they're thrown on this boat. And they're basically on this boat with no entertainment. Nothing. They're like, what? Yeah. And they're still trying to get to the hotel. Meanwhile, Imelda Marcos is, planned a luncheon for them the next day with 200 children and the Beatles. And so they're going to play that night, but they're supposed to come do this luncheon. And their manager, Tony, I forget his last name, but he is like, yeah, that's not going to happen. He tells Brian Epstein, and Epstein's like, well, we don't do that. And, and they're told it's not a request. So you're in another country. This is a dictator telling you, go ahead, Snags.
This reminds me of the Deep Purple story. I forget what country it is. You know that story where they go to some country to play, and it's some dictator, and there was some conflict where they were feeling wonky about playing because they didn't like the totalitarian vibe of the place. And the dictator had his henchmen push one of the roadies down an elevator shaft and kill him.
Oh my God.
Jesus Christ.
And Google it. And Deep Purple, and that's when they were like, oh shit, we have to play. And they had to go out and play when their friend had just been murdered. They said that
I did not know that story. That's
Google that story when we do our Deep Purple
we'll
episode. Yeah, we'll talk about it. But keep going. Similar situation.
Yeah, so it's in '66. They're down on this island. There's security. They can't do anything. They go, they play. Well, now that they've played, they're hearing rumblings like, you stood us up, what the fuck? And now security's gone. There's no one at the hotel. There's this mob coming up. They're getting spit at, people screaming and shit. And they're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, suddenly there's no one there to protect them. And the band, the whole entourage, they get their shit. They're trying to get to the airport. Suddenly there's no vehicles. They manage to get a vehicle, and it's like Escape from the Island. It's like these guys had never
You just
been
mentioned a song from The Elder by Kiss.
So glad you're here.
So right, we got our Kiss reference.
Yeah,
they're rushing to get to the airport, and there's one flight left to leave, and they're trying to get to that plane. They're terrified. They're thinking, we're gonna die. This is the end. And these islanders, everyone's just crowding around, and they manage to get onto the plane. They're the last people on the plane, and the plane leaves. But had they stayed, had something happened, and we'll just deal with this tomorrow, I don't know what may have happened, because we all know about the Marcos. They were killing people left and right. So it's just crazy that
hey man, let's start a band. Let's the three of us start a band and go do a gig in North Korea.
That's what we should do.
If we do that, we kind of deserve whatever the fuck happens to us.
Right. So with that, they get on the plane, and like I had said before, they're closer and closer to coming to the point of no longer touring. And this, obviously, you get on the plane and you're flying out, and you're like, what the fuck was that? Why did this happen? Who didn't? Because they didn't even know that they were supposed to be somewhere. And the rest of the world, the 2 or 3 heavy years, the demand for them to be everywhere, and they had turned away a lot of things. So it was just another one of those in their mind. Instead, they're on the plane like, dude, we barely got the hell out of there. And Brian Epstein is, drunk in the front of the plane, just not really focusing on everything. El Condor.
In the house.
Merch site. We got mugs, stickers, t-shirts.
Anything you want, just go
on it.
And
you request it, we'll slap a Snags and Silky logo on it.
There you go. Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure.
SnagsandSilky.com. Hit the Snags and Silky store.
That's
sponsored by Snags and Silky.
Yeah, so they're venting on Brian for this happening, and I think this laid seeds for Brian's, and we can, whenever in this episode, we'll talk about Brian Epstein and his whole, issues. But I think this fed into some of that insecurity that he had already, where he really dropped the ball here, and it damn near bit them in the ass.
I want to ask, this is a good segue to ask Alan, what are your thoughts on Brian Epstein and this guy who never really managed a band before, suddenly he's got the biggest band in the world? You have any thoughts on that whole dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, I thought overall he was a good manager, but man, he stepped on some landmines along the way. The Philippines, that was just a disaster. I think he probably, the amount of money was just too good to say no.
I think they might have died, though. It was.
I know they might, and they got their money. That money was taken back from them.
Yeah, I don't think they got any money out of it.
They got no money out of that deal. They were just lucky to get out. To your point.
Yeah. The article I read about it was $17,000 in or 17,000 something ticket receipts, something like that.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how much money that would have been,
but yeah, I mean, his whole thing was getting them to tour. That was his primary core competency, as they say in the,
I think
so,
before him, you had just raw leather jackets, smoking cigarettes, fighting on stage, slinging obscenities, and he was catalyst in getting them to the image that became Beatlemania that took off. So he really was a linchpin in that.
So Alan, what do you think if his primary core competency was getting them to tour, and we're about to we'll eventually get to when they stopped touring, but since we're on the subject, how do you think that affected him as manager when they stopped touring?
Oh, I think it devastated him. I think.
He felt that he had nothing. What else am I going to do?
What's he going to do?
Right. What else? What else, Alan? What else on that subject?
I mean, yeah, he certainly was the reason. He brought them to that next level. So, and there was still work for him to do, I'm sure. But yeah, without touring, what's he gonna? He's not gonna do anything in the studio.
Right. But I mean, managing their appearances. I mean, he could have done
the promotion, part of it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know that he managed any other bands. Maybe he did. I don't know.
There's a list. He also managed Seal of Black, who was a big vocalist, the Moody Blues.
Right. Okay.
But by 68, they were on their way out.
Did that affect his mental? Like, did he fall into a depression of any kind when that happened? Or
his depression.
I want to hear what Alan thinks.
Well, there's theories both ways there. Yeah, I mean, because all I can think of now is him leading up to his death. And speculation. Was it suicide? Was it an accidental overdose? Nobody knows for sure.
I always thought it was suicide.
But I mean, I was watching Beatles Anthology not too long ago, and George had talked to him, just a couple days before. He said he seemed in really good spirits. I don't have any evidence that points to he committed suicide.
You know what happened? I think Courtney Love had him off.
She always.
There was a retreat. A weekend retreat that him and somebody else had planned. They went up there. Some friends had not shown up, and Brian got irritated and went back to London. The friends did show up, so he's back home. He was taking Tuinal and a lot of alcohol.
Yep.
So when he was found after not having answered the phone and stuff, it was ruled an accidental overdose of carbitol and alcohol. But he had a lot of other issues. He had these weird fetishes. It was like sadistic sexual fetishes, where he would bring a couple guys back to his place, and the two of them would beat the shit out of each other, and then the winner would beat the shit out of Brian. So Brian would show up, black eye, just a hot mess, and he was totally into that. And that's just very bizarre to me. This loss of control, almost like some way to abuse himself for being gay or something, putting himself through these severe beatings and stuff.
He was a masochist, basically.
He was really. So I think some of that, and then the Beatles deciding possibly to stop touring. I think in a way he may have been depressed and felt like, well, my job's done. But I just, what I've read, I think it was more drugs, such a new thing in its infancy, people just doing whatever they wanted. I think, and we still have people today that accidentally die from alcohol and
fentanyls the big thing now.
Hank Sr. died of pain medication and alcohol.
Yeah.
Nothing new.
Nothing new, and it's still going on. But I think that was what happened with Brian. But until today, when I read that, I thought he had committed suicide. I thought that was just a done deal.
That was the popular speculation at the time.
But so the other thing I wanted to touch on before we get to the albums and stuff, the Beatles cartoon ran for 3 seasons, 39 episodes. It was a Saturday morning cartoon, and there was a 4th season, but the 4th season was just reruns from the other seasons.
Quick question. In the pre-show before we started recording, you mentioned you found somewhere you can buy those on DVD. I know Alan already has them on DVD and probably has 35 millimeter prints of them, but
no, I don't. Believe me, that's one thing I don't have. I've never even seen them. That's how.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we all 3 got to buy those and then do another episode.
So what they were, just if somebody's hearing this and like you, Alan, what's that?
Alan knows what they were.
I know what they were. Yeah.
I'm saying if somebody doesn't, there were 39 episodes, and each episode was the name of a song, and that song would be in that episode, and then the plot of that episode was whatever that song was. So they would whoever would loosely take Misery and make that the episode, and then they'd have some songs. It was probably very formulaic. I remember seeing it growing up, but it's been decades since I've seen them.
I've seen excerpts, but you were telling me in the pre-show you can buy the DVDs somewhere.
Yeah, I was in the process of looking them up when you came on, and I found Etsy, and I've never bought anything from Etsy.
They're on Etsy?
For like $18.
Right. Wow. Send me the link and I will put it on the Click Pit. And it's just fucking $18. I'm gonna buy those fucking DVDs. But send me the link. I'll put it on the Click Pit after we buy our copies.
I don't know the quality of this, so I was gonna continue searching Beatles cartoon.
We will try to have a link on the Click Pit on those. We can't mention this Beatles cartoon without mentioning the Black Sabbath parody that somebody did. It's on YouTube. If you search Black Sabbath Beatles cartoon, you'll probably find it, but it's fucking hilarious. It's Black Sabbath. It's like
War Pigs?
I don't remember, but it's like a 5-minute cartoon.
Yeah, it's one of the songs with the hijinks running around.
Total Beatles cartoon style, but you've got Ozzy as the blabbering idiot who can't put a sentence together. Mm-hmm. Bill Ward chugging alcohol. It's funny as hell.
Yeah, it's done exactly like the Beatles cartoon.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that ran for 3 seasons during all of this other stuff going on. Help, and the Help movie comes out. Then Rubber Soul, and for me, Rubber Soul. They talked about they were watching some blues guy from America discussing some of the rock and roll stuff, and the blues guy said, that's just plastic soul, because they were talking about the R&B singers that were covering
Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels.
Stuff like that. Say, that's just plastic soul. And they thought that was a great analogy. And then they get this guy, a photographer, who's going to do the album cover. And he explained to them he's got this cool effect. And they if you look at the cover of Rubber Soul, they're kind of funhouse. They're elongated a little bit, just slightly, and they were kicking around a possible name, and Paul came up with Rubber Soul instead of Plastic Soul, and they went with that. But I felt like when we talked about doing a 3-part Beatles, you really do have a jumping off with Help, and I feel like Rubber Soul just shattered all the possibilities going forward. There was they really broke the mold with Rubber Soul.
In my mind, that happens with Revolver, but I'll respect your opinion. Yeah.
Well, let's get Alan to go down Rubber Soul. Maybe if he's got songs there.
Hip us to your thoughts on Rubber Soul.
Yeah, Rubber Soul, yes.
That's a CD. For those of you. So we've got a webcam. This is audio only podcast. This slacker's holding up a fucking CD. Every other record we mentioned, he's got the original 1963 release.
Well, I've got the U.S. version of Rubber Soul on vinyl. Let's see.
Oh yeah, come on now, that's better.
There we go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so, but that's a very different version than the UK. The U.S. version does not include "Drive My Car," which the UK version opens with.
Fucking killer song.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So no, Rubber Soul is actually my second favorite Beatle album. My first is the White Album.
I love that.
But
my 3 favorites are White Album, Abbey Road, and Let It Be. The last triple threat. But keep going. Keep going.
Rubber Soul's the first album that they were free of concert, radio, or film commit. They were able to really stretch out in the studio with this one.
Yeah.
All right, Alan, keep going.
I'll just go down the list here. Drive My Car. I mean, just right out of the gate, fantastic song. And then Norwegian Wood. First song they used the sitar, I believe.
Yeah, that is.
So
now, do you think the character in that song burns the bitch's house down the next day?
Yes, since I've heard that version, that's what I want to believe. Yeah. I never, for 20 years, it never occurred to me that's what. I just thought he was lighting a fire in the fireplace, waiting for her to come back.
Possibly. I go back and forth.
But yet there's a dark undercurrent that we're detecting here where he burns that shit down.
Yeah.
So nasty, you got to burn the house down, which was the title.
I'm just saying,
Steve.
If I gotta sleep in the bathtub,
yeah,
I'm burning your fucking house.
Yeah,
it's going down. Yeah,
it's coming down.
Keep going, Alan.
All right, You Won't See Me. It's a nice little song. I wouldn't say the best on the album.
Mm-hmm.
Nowhere Man, though, killer. I mean, the harmonies on that, the background, the vocals. I mean, just
the lyrics. The lyrics are amazing. They fucking made a movie called Nowhere Man.
No, it's Yellow Submarine, but the character.
No. There's a movie. I think it's called Nowhere Man. I think there's a movie that somebody else made.
Nowhere Boy.
Nowhere Boy. It's about John Lennon as a youth. Yeah. Right. Nowhere Boy.
Oh,
look for that.
If I may digress with that point.
Yeah.
I saw that movie at a really huge theater, like where they usually have concerts, a theater here in Albany, and they had the surviving members of the Quarrymen there.
Holy shit!
Yeah, and they played the film, and then the Quarrymen came out and had like a Q&A, and they played a few songs. They were the Skiffle band.
Yeah.
Fucking awesome.
Wow.
So that was a night. Yeah, that was cool.
Well, that's a feather in the cap. That's like seeing the Yardbirds or something,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shit.
It was cool, and the movie's pretty good too. I did enjoy the movie.
I did not know about it. I'll have to look for it.
Yeah. We'll link that shit in the click pit, yo.
Yeah, Nowhere Man really had that existential LSD kind of thing.
Yeah, I have a special connection to that now too. But I have 2 boys that are much older now. They're teenagers, but when they were toddlers, I used to play the guitar for them before they went to bed. You know, kind of sing them, you know, to sleep, kind of a thing.
Nice.
And Nowhere Man was on that. They loved that song. So I used to play Nowhere Man for them, and Yellow Submarine, of course.
Oh yeah.
But anyway,
that's great.
Think for Yourself. That's a George song. Great. You know, I think, you know, now George is. You can tell George is now kind of getting more. I think John and Paul are rubbing off on him as far as the songwriting.
Yeah, I think they lit the fuse for his creativity.
Yeah.
And songs like Think for Yourself, even though George wrote it and sings it, it's also the Beatles' new album and a new style of vocals where they're talking about real shit. It's not From Me to You anymore. It's not
Right.
Love Me Do.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this in the previous episode, Silky. Dylan. Fucking Dylan. He woke them the fuck up when it comes to lyrics, I think.
Yeah, plus they're a little older. You know, that too. I mean, you know, you at 20, it's hard to write for the 15-year-old because you're 20, you know. So I feel like all that influenced them, but they are a little older, a little more traveled, and it's a natural progression. Like, okay, we did that. Let's write some real shit before I put this gun in my mouth, you know.
Yeah.
The cool thing I love about Think for Yourself is Paul is playing the bass through what's called a Leslie speaker, which I'd never heard of before, but I guess it's a speaker that rotates. It spins around.
Okay.
You plug your instrument in there and it makes like a distortion sound. If you listen to that, that's Paul's bass through a Leslie speaker.
Shit.
I'm stop me if I dive way too deep.
No, this is the kind of shit. This is the kind of shit we want to hear. This is why we're trying to shut up and listen to you, because you break out these gems here. Keep going.
The Word. I love that song.
Yeah, it's a great song.
It's just, I mean, it's the Beatles.
That's totally about pot.
Yeah. Is it?
It's also very typically
100%.
60s song. You know, The Word is Love.
It's love and peace, but it's about getting stoned to the bone.
So, all right. Well, boy, I'm learning tonight. This is great. Yeah. Thank you. Michelle. Yeah, this is Paul. You know, just Paul at his best. You know, I'm not crazy about the song, but it's a great song. You can't say it's not a great song. It's just Paul, you know, doing his thing.
Oh yeah.
What Goes On, a countryish number. This is the only. Here we go, diving a little bit deeper here. This is the only Lennon-McCartney Starkey composition.
Interesting.
Oh.
Yes.
Little dash of Ringo in the mix.
And and speaking of Ringo, and I've seen Ringo twice. The last time was in 18 here during the summer, and we brought the boys, so they got to see, my kids got to see a Beatle.
That's cool.
He still plays What Goes On. He still plays that song.
Oh, that's great.
He's up on the riser on the drums. He still looks like he's on the Ed Sullivan Show. It's just unbelievable.
Nice.
It's crazy.
That's cool as shit.
Yeah.
I know Harrison plays a Gretsch on that recording. Very rockabilly. Vibe throughout.
Right.
That's a great song, though.
Yeah. And then Girl, a John song. And what I love about this is he's, pretending to inhale. Well, maybe he wasn't pretending, but he's inhaling a joint every so often on this song.
Yeah, I always thought it was just the emotion of this girl he's thinking about, and he's inhaling the whole thing. But no,
really,
really,
it's always
probably singing about yoga.
I know at this stage in their lives, it all comes back to the weed.
Yeah. But he's probably singing about Yoko.
Right.
So
actually, John said Rubber Soul was the pot album, Revolver was the LSD album.
There you go.
So, anyway, I'm looking through you. Another, good Lennon-McCartney song. There's a version of this on Anthology 2 that I think I like better. It doesn't have the bridge part in the song. It just stays with the verse.
Right.
But anyway, it's kind of stripped down, and I prefer that version anyway.
I always like that I'm looking through you is like a calling out a fake some girl in a fake relationship. She's fake.
Yeah, Paul. I think Paul wrote this about Jane Asher.
Jane Asher, yeah. She's an actress, apparently stunningly beautiful. I haven't looked her up to see what she looks like.
She was in Deep Throat. You didn't see her in Deep Throat?
Oh yeah, in the fisting scene.
Yeah, that nasty fisting scene in the movie.
Okay, all right. We're moving on. In My Life, I love that.
We've got this ongoing thing. So just sidebar here. Silky is binging.
In My Life. Go ahead, Alan.
Silky.
We're not going to interrupt you, but we got to hear this.
Really quick. So Silky will bitch about some subjects that we cover on the podcast, like Roger Corman. We did a Roger Corman episode, and he was like, "This is stupid. No one cares about Roger Corman." But now he's obsessed with Roger Corman since we did the episode. He's watching every
episode died 20 minutes in because I didn't do anything.
It was great. It was a good episode.
Fucking
you're being too hard on yourself. Anyways, he's watching every single Roger Corman movie, and he'll text me about it. And my stock reply is, "I hear there's a real nasty fisting scene in that one."
Yeah, Attack of the Crab Monsters.
Nasty fisting scene.
About the fisting scene.
Anyways, back to the Beatles.
What better segue from fisting into In My Life?
Yes.
It's probably one of the best songs John Lennon ever wrote. I mean, it says Lennon-McCartney, but at this point, it's one or the other.
There is a movie.
Whoever sings, you can pretty much count it. That's who wrote.
There's a movie from the late 80s, early 90s with John Turturro and some other cats, indie flick called In My Life. It's about that. It's based on that song. It has a song on the soundtrack. It's fucking awesome. I think Jodie Foster's in it too. I'll have to look it up. Good flick.
I think that's right.
It's called In My Life.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great movie. It's kind of based on the song. Look it up.
I think Jodie Foster's in that.
Yeah.
Cool.
John Turturro and some other cats. Late 80s, early 90s crew. Anyways, keep going.
Wait. This song is probably the only filler song I can think of. It's okay. It's a good little song. Just not a go-to, not one of my favorites. But then If I Needed Someone, again, that definitely is George on the 12 string. Again, George taking another step into better songwriting. I love the song. I love If I Needed Someone.
Yeah, this is definitely a Byrds influence. There's a jangly guitar. It's very Roger McGuinn. I always hear the Byrds in this song. But like with all of these Beatle albums, growing up, you didn't have a CD version to skip songs.
Yeah.
These albums, you put them on and you listen to every song. So to this day, all of these songs are just, oh yeah, it's Rubber Soul, and it's tough to go, oh, this is a filler, or this, it's just it all makes this whole, flavor of album,
Absolutely. And then it winds up with Run for Your Life, just another great John song talking about how he's I guess it's Jealous Guy Part 1.
Run for Your Life is a fucking dark fucking song.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is Jealous Guy Part 1. That's
you.
Wow.
Yeah, he makes no bones about it. He's going to end you if you No, he can screw around, but you can't.
Okay? Yeah. That's the Elvis thing. Elvis had a girlfriend in every city, and his requirement was that they each be faithful to him.
Yeah. I know that speaking of Elvis, Lennon wrote this based on Elvis's "Baby Let's Play House." The whole thing is based on that Elvis song.
Yep.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, Rubber Soul, fantastic.
Yeah, Rubber Soul, amazing. They were still touring and going around. They get over. They do that whole Germany, Japan, Philippines thing, and then later, like I said, that article comes out in the U.S. and the Bible Belt, Southern U.S. They had bonfires, stamp out the Beatle buttons. These DJs would go on the radio and say, "Come down to the station with your Beatle albums.
Let's burn some records." Yeah.
They're standing there with a hammer breaking these records, and these kids.
Can I just pause to say there's so many amazingly awesome things about this country, but it's equally weighted by so many embarrassing fucking shit.
It's just incredible.
That's my public service announcement.
But to this day, a small inconsequential comment, and suddenly it's everywhere.
Oh yeah, it's the same thing now. Yeah, same
more
thing now.
So now. More so.
Think the Beatles, if there was social media back then, they probably would have ended up getting burned at the stake. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so overwhelming to see the footage though of some guy. "Oh, we hate the Beatles." Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they don't like Jesus. They think they're better than Jesus. We're gonna burn their records. Really, I got IQ of 10 and I'm married to my sister.
That same kid 2 years later has long hair and is
totally, yeah.
Cannonball, clearing a fucking ball, just it's just disgusting.
Yep.
So Revolver comes out, like you said, was kind of the LSD. The lyrics are even more cerebral, if you will.
This, to me, Revolver is them breaking through the atmosphere, Earth's atmosphere, and coasting into space.
Yeah, and again, Help was still in line with those first four albums, and then Rubber Soul is like the jumping off point of, hey, this is a new band. We're not doing this silly shit anymore. And I feel like Revolver is what they had been from 1958 working their way to. They had really encapsulated.
It's outside of those last three, that's my other favorite Beatles album. It's just fucking amazing.
Yeah,
it really is.
A great record. But again, while this is going on, they've with the stamp out the Beatles and this backlash, and Lennon went on the radio and TV continuously stating that I was talking about religion as a
and this, ladies and gentlemen, was the first apology tour.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends in the Christian American community, and I didn't mean to offend anybody, and I feel really bad.
But it exacerbated their unhappiness with touring, and they never did it again. And so
fuck that. Fuck you people.
That and just the chaos. Somebody would have died. It would have been the Who. You know how the Who had that tragedy?
Yeah.
It would have been on the Beatles.
So did Pearl Jam. They're heroes.
Yeah.
I think they had somebody stamped out at a concert too.
I think so. But Revolver comes out. They're able to just record and not have to run and do all this other stuff. But they did two videos, and they didn't even think of them as videos then. They did a performance
promo film, they call it.
Promo film for Rain and
Paperback Writer.
Paperback Writer.
So I'm on Wiki and I'm looking at the track listing. I don't see Rain. Was that on a UK version?
That's a single.
Single. Rain Rain is
Rain and Paperback Writer are on the U.S., not the British.
Rain
But
is an
Playlist
amazing.
has them.
Right.
Rain is an amazing fucking song.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's the first time, and I think of the Beatles always as like a band of firsts. You know, that the first to do this, that, the other thing. This was the first song I think they used backwards masking. Backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's a story too where as they started experimenting, suddenly every guitar had to be backwards. They like overkilled it, and George had to really rein them in and also let them go, depending on what was going on and their attention span, because it got to where they want to record and do all this crazy stuff, but then they want to go in the bathroom and get stoned out of their minds. And so
this is before Yoko was in the mix. Can you imagine?
Yeah,
throwing her in the mix. We'll get to that.
It was a lot to try and work through that, but they would raid the sound effects room with all these different instruments and start doing stuff. Mainly because it was there. What's this giant thing in the corner? Let's drag this over and see what we can do with it, which is amazing. And again, like you said, Alan, the first. You had Pink Floyd right at that same time, 66, 67, really experimenting, doing a lot of shit, but the Beatles were doing it first.
Sure, yeah. Okay. Do you want to go through the songs?
Yeah, we want to hear your thoughts on Revolver. Hip us to it.
Love it. I mean, right out of the gate, Taxman. First time George gets an opening track. And deservedly so. I mean, what a great tune. I love Stevie Ray Vaughan's cover of it too.
Yeah, and that's been pulled for some reason.
What's that?
That's been pulled from any streaming Taxman. If you've got that greatest hits, you're able to have it.
What are you talking about? Stevie Ray Vaughan's version?
Stevie Ray Vaughan covered Taxman.
Yeah, the Beatles version is on Spotify.
Yeah, but I'm saying Stevie's version of Taxman.
Who knows? Maybe somebody who loves taxes. I don't know.
I think
somebody in his estate loves high taxes, I guess. Anyways, keep going, Alan.
Okay. Eleanor Rigby. It's Paul with a string quartet, if I'm not mistaken. A Lennon McCartney song, but it's really just Paul. A solo Paul song, kind of like Yesterday. But a great song, just characters he, just pulled out of, his history, I think. And then I think he didn't say that he got it from the gravestone, but there was a gravestone around Liverpool with the name Eleanor Rigby on it.
Oh, wow.
Oh, maybe. I know the main actress in Help. Her first name is Eleanor.
Eleanor. Oh, okay.
He took that from her. Right. But
okay.
Who knows?
Yep. I'm Only Sleeping. One of my very favorite.
Oh yeah.
Beatles songs. Again, a great John song. Kind of pairs well with the one on the White Album. I'm So Tired.
So tired. Yeah. Yeah. I suffer from insomnia, so those songs I always leave me alone. I'm trying to sleep.
Right.
Yeah. So
really. There's a good point. I think the Beatles, part of the reason they were so popular, throughout the whole run, is that they wrote songs that we could all relate to.
Oh, absolutely.
Like almost to the point of like a Seinfeld, like you would never think of. Something so mundane as trying to get to sleep, write a song about it.
Yeah, and they just whatever they did, they're just great songs. People throughout their run, the bubbles finally burst, they finally flopped, and maybe visually, Magical Mystery Tour didn't do well, but the songs were through the roof.
I remember hearing, and we'll get to it, but right before Sgt. Pepper came out, some major music critic said, "Well, the Beatles are done. They've pretty much done everything they can. What else could they do?" And then they dropped Sergeant Pepper.
Yeah.
we'll get to that. Keep
Right.
going,
Yeah.
Alan.
That's amazing.
The next song is "Love You Too," and that's a George song with the sitar. Just a great opening where he just does a scale from the top down. You know, I just love this song. It kind of takes a left turn from everything you've ever heard from the Beatles up to this point. Like when I would just love to be there, you know, if I was there at the time to pick up this album. You have no idea what's coming when you put "Love You Too." When that sitar run, like what the hell was that? You know, it's just,
especially
George,
if you got half a tab of acid going and the lava lamps cranked up. You know?
Right. Here, There, and Everywhere, a great Paul song. He wrote this while waiting for John to wake up one morning. He went over there so they could work on songwriting or something, and he went. You know, John was still sleeping, went off or whatever. So Paul went to the pool, just sat by the pool, and whips off "Here, There, and Everywhere." Yeah, so
crazy.
That's Mozart level shit.
Yeah. Yellow Submarine. You know, what can you say about Yellow Submarine? Just kind of a staple. I mean, you know, as a kid, I just loved this song. You know, it's a great sing along. What's probably the best sing along song, maybe.
Oh, tremendous.
When I was taking guitar lessons, and again, I have a talent ceiling for that, you know, but that was the first song I learned how to play. Ding,
Nice.
ding, 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 ding. On a little single string. I remember playing it for my mom. Ding, 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 ding. Good tune.
Yeah, it is a good tune. Ringo does a great job with it, but near the end of the song, John kind of pipes in with the background. You know, woohoo! You know, he almost steals it. He almost steals the song, which I love the end of that song with John coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And then speaking of John, She Said. I love the story behind this. They were at a party somewhere in LA, I believe, and Peter Fonda was tripping at the time, and he would just go up to everybody and say, "I know what it's like to be dead." And it really freaked John out. And he just took that, you know, I think it might have started with he said, but she said sounded better. Just another favorite.
And now he does.
There you go.
He does know. Yeah.
They're both dead. Yeah.
He does.
Yeah.
Right. Good Day Sunshine, you know, and kind of, a pop tune, but a really good pop tune. Again,
very
Paul.
very California sunshiny type tune.
Oh yeah, where he took this, right? Paul was inspired to write this song from the Lovin' Spoonfuls. What a Day for a Daydream.
What a Day for a Daydream. That totally.
He heard that song and wrote Good Day Sunshine.
That totally tracks.
I can see that. It's really interesting to hear how they were in, because they influenced the whole fucking world, but to hear how they were influenced back by their contemporaries.
Oh yeah, they listen.
Yeah, it's very full circle. I always thought the cover to "What a Day for a Daydream" to me was very much Rubber Soul. You know, they're all standing there, same type of photograph, really, but.
And Your Bird Can Sing. Now this I think was John and Paul kind of really getting together on a song again. Mm-hmm. Great guitar riff. John and George, I think, are playing the same. Yeah, this is again a first. I believe it's the first time that two guitars are playing in harmony.
Wow.
On a pop tune, like Lynyrd Skynyrd would do that,
mm-hmm.
right? Ton of other bands, but again, Beatles, let's do this.
Allman Brothers,
sure. there's a version on Anthology 2 where they're developing this song, and John and Paul just break out in hysterics as they're listening back to the instrumental part. You know, they can't pull it together. But anyway, that's fun to listen to. For No One, great Paul song. One of my favorite Paul songs.
What's incredible there is there's so much imagery in that song. This misery that he started with Eleanor Rigby, but continues to paint these very dark imagery. It's a 2-minute song, but he manages the depth. This is a fully developed 3-dimensional creature here, and it's 2 minutes. It's 2 minutes.
And again, you can relate. You know, everybody can relate to it. It's just, the relationship's gone bad. So
a love that should have lasted years.
Yeah, right. Dr. Robert, kind of a fun song about an actual doctor that was kind of just spreading pills around everywhere.
I always think of Black Sabbath's Rock and Roll Doctor. Same vibe there.
Go get your stash.
I Want to Tell You, a great George song.
Yeah.
So I don't think we haven't. We heard. Taxman, Love You Too, and I Want to Tell You. Great.
Yeah, he's got 3 on here.
Great collection of songs by George.
Yeah.
I think it's got the Devil's Chord in there too. I could be wrong.
What's the Devil's Chord? Hip us to it.
Yeah, see, Steve's gonna be very disappointed when he hears me not explain this right, but it's basically in an octave, there's 1 through 7. It's the 3rd and the 5th, or the 3rd and the 6th. I don't know if you play them.
Is this he's referring to his musical partner in the band Wet Shoelaces, who you cats need to check out on Bandcamp.
Thank you.
Wet Shoelaces.
Thank you.
If you like Ween, if you like Frank Zappa, check out Wet Shoelaces. He's talking about Stephen Gregory, interviewed earlier in our episode, So Nasty You Got to Burn the House Down. So is this a chord that Robert Johnson came up with or something?
Well, it's a blues chord. Tony Iommi also talks about the
Devil's Chord. I'm gonna have to look that shit up. Okay.
So, and then Got to Get You Into My Life on my spreadsheet is number 1.
That's that is a rocking tune.
They put everything into this song with the horns.
Damn, that rocks.
Yeah, the horns and everything. Paul says that song specifically is about marijuana.
It is, yeah. That he came out.
It's not a love story. It's not. Right. It's just completely, sweet leaf.
It's an ode to marijuana, like you would write a song about chocolate. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that even better. Great.
Yeah. There you go. Now the opus de grande of this whole album, in my opinion.
Yeah. And Tomorrow Never Knows, and this was the first song recorded for the album, which I couldn't believe. Just wow. Yeah, John comes into the studio with this song, and it's in the key of C, and it just stays in the key of C. That's it. And he wanted to sound like 1,000 Tibetan monks chanting on a mountaintop. And so that's what they came up with.
And it's also really I talked about how this album is them breaking the atmosphere and coasting into space, and it really is an indication of things to come. I think with Sgt. Pepper and just a full-on psychedelics. This is a complete break from Love Me Do. It has nothing fucking to do with Love Me Do. It's just
I'd like to go into a time machine and just watch somebody listen to this album, look at their face when they hear Love You Too, and then at the end when Tomorrow Never Knows comes on.
What the fuck is this? The acid must really be kicking in. I'm gonna have to listen to this later when I'm not tripping. now my story about this song, there's an amazing band, which Alan, I'm sure you're familiar with, called the Claypool Lennon Delirium.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And
Love
it's Les Claypool. I'm not a huge Primus fan. And also I liked Sean Lennon's first solo album, but I'm not a huge, I don't follow everything he does. But when those two get together, they have a band called the Claypool Lennon Delirium, and they are amazing. And they started out kind of covering psychedelic songs, and they got a couple albums of originals. And right before the pandemic, my wife and I went and saw them at a local joint in Atlanta called the Variety Playhouse. $27. Fuck paying $500 to see the Rolling Stones when they're half dead. Go see the Claypool Lennon Delirium for $27.
Oh, geez, yeah.
And it was an amazing show, and they closed it with Tomorrow Never Knows.
Oh, nice.
And which they haven't recorded anywhere. It was just, oh, hey, and now that your minds have been blown by the shit you've already heard on the album, we're going to drop a song my dad did. And, of course, Sean sang it, and Sean Lennon is a better guitar player than his dad. He breaks out these killer lead runs and stuff, and his voice is just soaring throughout the theater, and it's just I know sounds stereotypical, but chills, dude. Chills up the spine.
You're giving me chills, yeah.
I was like, holy shit. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one. It was amazing.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'll be looking out for that. Yeah.
Oh, if they ever tour again, you got to see them.
Yeah, I've seen Primus and Les Claypool.
Yeah, but it's not this. But Claypool Lennon Delirium.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, those two, like Les Claypool gets into this silly kind of thumpy kind of thing, and Sean Lennon's very melodic, but his solo stuff can kind of not quite have enough edge, and they balance each other off. It's like it's like Tom Waits and Paul Westerberg starting a band or something, you know. It's just a really great combination.
Nice.
So at the end of August 66, like I'd said before, the Beatles permanently retire from touring, and they kind of take 3 months off. Paul is flying back into London in November, and he's got this idea for a song involving an Edwardian military band, and that would form the impetus of Sgt. Pepper's concept. And again, they would continue their technological experimentation that they'd done with Revolver, but this time they've got no deadline. There's nothing stopping them from just, fully developing songs to their best potential, but they go in, and pressure from EMI, they record Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane, and that's released as a double A side in February of 67. But those were left off the record, and then the album itself, Sgt. Pepper, is like this loosely conceptualized performance by a fictional band, Sgt. Pepper, and but the whole idea was conceived after that title track.
The Paul is dead conspiracy theorists think that Paul was replaced by somebody named Billy Shears. Just throwing that out there.
You guys,
and those are flat Earth Society people.
Sorry, you brought it up.
Yeah.
Steve got me this DVD for my birthday a long time ago. It's hilarious. It's
Paul McCartney really is dead.
Yeah,
that's the name of it.
The Last Testament of George Harrison. Yeah, they've got this guy trying to sound like George Harrison on audio, telling all about the car crash where Paul died and everything.
Hey, all I have to say is if Paul died, his replacement was a better songwriter, because my 3 favorite Beatle albums are after Paul died. So,
yeah,
I think it's all a bunch of shit.
How'd they find that guy? Jesus.
Sells records, right?
Looks just like Paul, and he's a better songwriter.
It's like when they said Peter Criss was dead, right?
Who said that? I never heard that rumor.
Oh, look that up. It's a whole thing I don't want to talk
Wow.
about.
Really?
But,
I'm a Kiss nut, and I've never heard the Peter Criss is
never
dead
heard
conspiracy.
Never heard that.
I'm looking that
Yeah.
shit up.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Not dead. That he was homeless, living at the end of a pier in LA.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was National Enquirer
Sorry.
shit before the
Yeah,
reunion
not
tour.
dead, but
Not
might as well.
anywhere near on the level of the Paul is dead stuff.
But yeah, so Sgt. Pepper becomes one of the first like concept albums. I think influencing what the Who did with Tommy. All
The
these
Wall-
concept
The
albums,
Wall,
the
and the
Elder,
ultimate opus grande concept album of them
The
all,
Elder.
The Elder by Kiss.
Yeah. Just none of them managed to capture what the Beatles did. Because you call it a concept album, but it's really, you've got an opening intro, a bunch of songs, and then an outro. An amazing day in the life is just ridiculous.
Day in the Life blows my mind every time I listen to it. That's
It's
really
always, it's always phenomenal. And you're able to really see how amazing a songwriter Paul McCartney was. Just these mundane, like you said, Alan, these little snippets of action. Woke up,
Fell out of bed.
Just the whole. You're just like, we've all done it, and.
Right.
But just sit and write a masterpiece song about it.
It just becomes amazing. And that song "Good Morning" with all the zoo animals and shit, and I love that gritty, nasty music. Is he's on the bus going to work and all that is.
While we're on this subject, we mentioned this in the Hendrix episode, but we have to mention Hendrix playing the Royal Albert Hall. This album drops. He's got a gig like the next week, and the Beatles are showing up to the gig because Hendrix is the hip new thing. Everybody's got to check out Hendrix, and he has the balls to open the show with a cover of Sgt. Pepper with the Beatles in attendance a week after the damn album dropped.
And had he bombed it, it would have been incredibly
really embarrassing.
But he just destroys it, and they're like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, Hendrix blew everybody's mind, but I have to drop a quote from Ernest Hemingway here. The only value we have as human beings are the risks we are willing to take. And cats like Hendrix and the Beatles lived by that motto. They weren't recycling and rehashing sure things at all,
No.
Right.
But yeah, I would say without Pet Sounds, Beach Boys, you don't have Sgt. Pepper. But again, you create these amazing songs because you're that good. And this is their 8th album. If you think about that, this is their 8th record, and it's Sgt. Pepper. It's like
it's 3 years removed from "She Loves You."
Yeah. Breakthrough after breakthrough after breakthrough. They continued to reinvent. They continued to just force the entire industry to.
It's a mix. It's a mix. It's Pet Sounds, and LSD.
Yeah. But this record with the cover, the lyrics on the back of the record, all the stuff inside the record, they just continued to invent things, and the industry had to catch up.
I saw a discussion on Reddit, and Alan, maybe you know that, or Silky, maybe one of you know if this is true or not, that Paul, that the Sgt. Pepper album cover has a bunch of famous people on it, and Paul wanted to include Jesus and Hitler.
Oh yes,
right. Yeah, that's true.
You know the story behind that, Alan?
I know of it, but no, I couldn't
Right.
give you the details. No.
Right. And they
Yeah, I
were
can't
like,
remember.
dude, they were burning our records like last week. Let's reel it in just a bit.
Yeah. But yeah, the just a phenomenal record. And so that came out in May of '67, and while you were in the bathroom, we had this discussion.
So those of you who are listening won't know, but I had to edit out a piss break. That's what old Silky's referring to. Keep going.
Good clarification.
Anyway,
Yeah.
It's crucial.
Keep going.
Anyway, so in August, Brian Epstein dies. Late August, they, the Sergeant Pepper is this incredible thing, and then Magical Mystery Tour, they are slated in December to do this television film, and I was saying to Alan that I feel like as soon as Brian Epstein dies, it really the sand starts pouring out of the hourglass into the bottom. They have kicked around with Magical Mystery Tour. There are people that say Magical Mystery Tour is Paul's first solo album. It was an EP. It's the first time an EP would chart the way it did in England. And it ends up being a double EP because they had 6 songs, and that's not long enough for an album, but it's too long for an EP. So they decided to make a double EP. And then they had a comic book guy do like a little book that came with it. I actually have my mother's version as an EP with that booklet still in.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's beat up, but it's from '67, so I love it. I like that I have it. But the songs, there were 6 songs, and I think Paul sings most of it. George manages to do this instrumental called Flying, and Full on the Hill, Your Mother Should Know, and Magical Mystery Tour. That's all Paul. John sings I Am the Walrus.
Right.
And Blue Jay Way is George. So it's really just a quick thing, but they were reeling from Brian's death. And then they do this TV show, and the idea was, hey, let's just get a bunch of weird characters on a bus, and let's make Help look like Citizen Kane. Yes, yeah.
I was dying to hear your opinion on the film, Snags. This was not an inspiration for you.
Yeah. But I think they thought, hey, let's get all these weird people on a bus. Yeah. We'll ride around the countryside and we'll film what happens. The sad thing, nothing happened.
But when you're on acid, it seems like all kinds of shit is happening.
Well, again,
it's not caught on the film.
What works for the Beatles is the music never deteriorated. So here's this hodgepodge of people, but then randomly here's another Beatles song, and it's amazing. And they close out that whole movie with All You Need Is Love, with all these people in the studio, the Stones, everybody's there. It was quite the circus, and the Stones had just done the Rock and Roll Circus, or a year later, I think, in '68. Yeah. Totally from that experience of the Beatles song All You Need Is Love being sent out as a
that was the
BBC special.
That was a worldwide thing.
Yeah.
And
It's like a worldwide broadcast, right?
right, and the Beatles were representing England, right?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about Rock and Roll Circus, which we'll cover in depth when we do our 3-part Stones series, is you've got Jethro Tull with Tony Iommi on guitar.
Yeah. And another, we can mention that then too, Taj Mahal had come over illegally and plays on there too.
Yeah.
I don't think he was supposed to be in the country or something. But, so
Anyways.
yeah, Magical Mystery Tour is their third movie. You know, they'd signed a 3-movie deal. Hard Day's Night, Help, and Magical Mystery Tour was the 3, and so that was like an obligation. But
Did
they
that get theatrically released, or was it just on
no,
TV?
it was TV,
Okay.
TV and VHS and all that.
Well, the problem with that was it was broadcast on Boxing Day, the day after Christmas in England.
Yeah.
But the problem was the BBC showed it in black and white, and the whole crux of that movie is the colors, you know, the psychedelicness of it all. And to watch it in black and white, they got hammered by the critics.
Yeah, they really fucked it up.
It was just like, what the hell is this? Just did not go over well.
No, I forgot about that. That was definitely a
unlike when you see it in color and then it's suddenly brilliant.
It is.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it helps.
It does. And that's one of the movies. There are tits at the end of that.
Oh well, there you go. See, my holy grail is tits and good writing. That at least has 50% of the equation.
Yeah, there are tits in Magical Mystery Tour.
Okay.
I think this is the beginning of the end with Brian dying. They kind of retreat to the Maharishi, and that's a whole thing we'll get into with the next episode. I feel that they got kind of sidetracked. I think this guy was a charlatan, as most of these people are.
And you know who didn't fall for that shit? Of course, Keith Richards. Keith.
Oh yeah, because they were there too.
The Stones went.
Right. Yeah.
Mick went out and got all sucked into that cult. And Keith Richards, he was the predecessor to Lemmy, right? Lemmy, of course, is the ultimate apex of human evolution. But
sure.
Keith Richards was the Apostle Paul or whatever. He was the Moses. He was the cat before our Messiah Lemmy was Keith Richards.
Okay.
And he did not fall for that shit. Anyways, I want Alan to run down Magical Mystery Tour and hip us to his thoughts on all the tracks.
Actually, could we back up to Sgt. Pepper?
Oh, fuck. We skipped Sgt. Pepper. Yeah, let's do that first. Yeah, go ahead.
I just because you're going to love this story. This was the first album that I really got into by the Beatles. I mean, I think I told you last week, I knew about them as a youngster, but really didn't have access. You know, I was too young to go out and buy albums. It was just played for me by my older cousins. And I liked it, but that was it. You know, and then years go by. And now it's 1978. And this movie comes out.
Oh shit.
Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Yeah.
And it's the Bee Gees and Peter Frampton.
And Aerosmith.
Aerosmith covering Come Together was the one quality thing about it.
I have no idea that this was an album by the Beatles. I'm 12 years old. You know?
I've yet to see that movie.
You need to see it.
I never saw it, but I heard the songs, loved the songs. And then I think it was my next door neighbor tipped me off. He's like, yeah, this is that's by the Beatles. And he told me about the album. I went out and bought the album, heard A Day in the Life, and that was it. I mean, game over. That made me a Beatles fan from that point on. So
go down the tracks.
Yeah, the tracks. So of course, the opener, Sergeant Pepper, I guess. So this was intended to be, because they're not going to tour anymore. Let's send out an album of, a concert. That was the original intention. I don't believe that all the songs fit that theme, but it still works.
Yeah, I think the first two songs are like an opener.
Yeah.
To the whole.
Right. And then the rest of it, was not, 100%, married to that theme. But I still think everything works. With a little help from my friends and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Paul's bass on those two songs is so melodic and great. And I mean, I play bass now, so I every time I hear a song, I always listen for the bass line. And if you listen to those two songs, listen to Paul play. It's just unbelievable, just great. I think he gets sold short at sometimes is how great a bass player he was.
And Joe Cocker's cover of "Help from My Friends" is
killer,
enormous.
Getting Better, great song by Paul with John throwing in Can't Get Any Worse.
Yeah.
Couldn't get much worse.
Yeah, just perfect. John and Paul working together.
Right.
Fixing a Hole. Jeez, I wonder what that's about. Could it be about heroin? I don't know.
You think so? Yeah. See, I'm still that little kid going, "Oh, there's a hole in the roof,"
Yeah, I was thinking sex immediately, but anyway,
just
fix that hole. Anyways,
wow.
Keep going.
Yeah. She's leaving
That's why
home.
She's leaving home.
Yeah. Paul again with working with George Martin and the orchestra. Fantastic song. And then that goes into being for the benefit of Mr. Kite. John wrote this song, basically took it from a poster. All the lyrics from this song is from a poster.
Yeah, almost every bit of it.
1842 or something.
Yeah.
And he told George Martin, I want this song to be all about the circus and everything. I want to smell the sawdust. So that was
and they cut up a bunch of tape and then ran it through. They had no idea what it would sound like, and you totally got this carousel kind of
exactly thing. Yeah,
George Martin.
That ends side one, and then you flip it over, and again, I'd love to see the look on people's faces when they hear "Within You, Without You."
Yeah,
I mean, just George, just fantastic. I think this might be the best song on the album. It's just
it's amazing.
Yeah.
And as a kid, you got to read along. So even when the lyrics are kind of buried in the music, you knew what he was saying because you were reading along with it.
Another first, right? Print the lyrics on the album.
Yeah, I think so.
When I'm 64. This was a song that Paul kind of dug up from when he wrote this when he was a teenager, I believe, and just never put it on anything. But he thought this would fit the whole Sgt. Pepper thing, and it works. It just works. Lovely Rita, a song about a meter maid. Again,
but this was actually Rita was in the office with Brian Epstein. She did a lot of their fan club stuff in the early 60s. She had an affair with one of the Beatles, but she's sworn to secrecy. There's a documentary about her, and it's very cool to see. Because she just talks about all this Beatles stuff that no one would have been privy to but her,
Sure.
It's very cool.
Nice. Good morning. You've mentioned, basically the last three. Good morning again with the animal sounds. That's a fun song. to listen to. Again, you know, I call it's a kind of like another Seinfeld song. You know, just talking about, you know, getting out of work, walking down the street, you know, seeing this person, you know, looking at a pretty girl.
It's no coincidence that Seinfeld was the by far most popular TV show of the 90s, and Friends was kind of like the Rolling Stones to the Seinfeld's Beatles. But there's something about finding the magic in this ordinary shit that everybody can relate to that, if you do it right, just blows you up, you know?
Yeah. And then you get the Sgt. Pepper reprise, and, you know, then A Day in the Life. And yeah, just, I remember I could picture listening to that for the first time and just go, wow.
Well, and John wanted to put this high-pitched tone at the end to irritate your dog.
Right. They did.
And then a recording of them Never Could Be Any Other Way, and have it repeat to where you thought that your record was skipping.
Right.
And
that was on the UK version.
Yeah.
The US version did not have that repeating.
Yeah, my mom had the UK version somehow, because that's the version I always knew. And then when these were being reissued on CD, it was on the CD, and my dad's like, "What the hell is that?" And I'm like, well, "That's the end of the song." What do you know? Yeah. But the one, my mom had the UK version, I guess, because
it reminds me of you telling me you're driving somewhere with your dad and you're listening to "Let It Bleed," the Stones album.
Oh,
and that song "Country Honk" comes on, and right in the middle of it, they just put a car horn in the middle of there, and you guys are driving. And you're like, "What the?"
Scared the living shit out of me.
Yep. I hate
it was a road trip. It was a road trip, and my dad decides to let me learn how to drive in his friend's Porsche. His friend's not there, and his friend would not have wanted his buddy's 16-year-old to drive his Porsche. And we're on the highway, and my dad's gonna just go to sleep, and I got Country Honk playing. Never heard that. It was like brand new on CD, and I had it. I couldn't wait to hear "Let It Bleed." And here's this honk right as I'm changing lanes, and I almost wrecked the car because I thought I was, coming over on somebody. Good stuff.
Yeah, but I think "A Day in the Life" is probably the last time John and Paul really collaborate on something.
Possibly, because I'd have to look at Abbey Road and Let It Be. I mean, there seemed. I just recently, speaking of Let It Be, it's now streaming on Disney Plus for the first time in 50 years.
Yeah,
and this kind of ties in with when you were talking about the movie Sgt. Pepper. In the 70s, with the Beatles gone, there was a heartache in the 70s. Saturday Night Live, they really wanted the Beatles to get back together. I think most of the people walking around in the 70s really wanted to see the Beatles get back together.
There was a theatrical show called Beatlemania, where the Beatles got back together and toured, and it was people.
That was incredible. My mother dragged me to see that. And they had different stages of the Beatles, but so that movie Sgt. Pepper, you got the most popular band around at that time, having just done Saturday Night Fever. And so their next big prize, hey, let's write a love letter to the Beatles. We'll do this movie based on all their songs. And so they had different bands perform the songs that were on that album. So that's how Aerosmith came and did Come Together.
Their cover of Come Together fucking rocks. It was before they died in a plane crash in the early 80s, and they're replaced by aliens.
They're the bad guys in that movie.
Yeah, I got to see that movie.
Yeah,
it's the Bee Gees, but it's the Beatles. It's it's worth seeing once. Nothing you need to own or anything. But
all right.
you know. But that's all I got for part 2. Well, if you guys have any parting,
Well, let me just mention the Sergeant Pepper Bee Gees movie. I'll skip in all the garbage, but there is, if you look closely, you got Steve Martin covering Maxwell's Silver Hammer, which
that's a great video bit.
Yeah, and we'll get to that, but that is the song that Paul was so obsessive about recording, it drove the other Beatles nuts. We'll get to that. George Burns, Fixing a Hole.
Yeah.
And
it's a who's who of people.
Right.
And nobody else. Oh, Billy Preston doing Get Back, Come Together, Aerosmith. So that could have been a really good EP. You take out all the garbage and you got at least 4 good songs there.
Yeah. And I'm sure it was a record. I don't know. But I do remember seeing the show.
Yeah. I'm not gonna, listen to the Bee Gees covering all the rest of that shit, but
no. Oh, do they sing all the other ones?
The rest of it's like Bee Gees and or Robin Gibb or whatever.
Yeah, the Aerosmith.
I'm surprised really Donnie and Marie weren't on there. And Casey and the Sunshine Band.
The Earth, Wind, and Fire cover of "Got to Get You Into My Life."
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Love that. That's one of my favorite covers. Love their version of that.
Yeah,
to check that out. All right, so now Magical Mystery Tour. Hip us to your thoughts on that, and then we'll wrap this motherfucker up.
Okay, Magical Mystery Tour. Yeah, I got the. As long as we're on there, this is the Super Deluxe. It comes with the movie,
the Blu-ray,
and I think is this the booklet you were talking about?
Yes.
See, they redid this. They reissued.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's the Blu-ray. It's got some great shit on it.
The Blu-ray. So anyway. Magical Mystery Tour. That's a nice, fun song. I kind of like every other song better. The Fool on the Hill.
Yeah, I love that one. Loved Your Mother Should Know. Great tune.
Blue Jay Way, great. Again, George, just every George song is great, on these albums, because I'm sure, they were only gonna put his best, whatever.
Well, and I'm sure Blue Jay Way actually happened. He's at a party.
Yeah. Again,
he's trying to get to a party and can't find his way because of the fog in his head from all the pot.
Basically, in this era, every song is about weed.
Yeah.
Your Mother Should Know of another Paul, kind of pop song, but a good pop song, not sappy or anything, just great lyrics, sing along.
Mm-hmm.
And then the part in the movie, I Am the Walrus, I think that's a nice, that's a really good scene. Paul says his favorite part of the movie is I Am the Walrus. It's the only time you see the Beatles, you can see them play it.
Yeah, it's the only cohesive part of that whole thing.
Right.
But just a great, and then their identities becomes really a huge influence, I think, to Kiss with the identity and the different characters.
I didn't think of it. Right. Yeah.
You got the Eggman, you got the Walrus, you got the Demon, you got the Star Child. Yeah. All
I believe John wrote this as kind of like a way to get to people, try to figure out his lyrics, because of the whole thing with Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. People put that together, LSD, so everything was being analyzed. So he's like, I'm just going to write a song that's just total nonsense. See what they come up with,
Right.
Paul is dead.
Paul is dead. Yeah.
And apparently he was saying cranberry sauce, not I buried Paul.
Yeah, at the end of Strawberry Fields, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. He did say cranberry sauce. Yeah.
Well, I think that's it, fellas.
Any last words, Alan, on this era of the Beatles?
I think this was my favorite era, kind of post-Fab, experimental, just, kind of taking the next step up. Right up until, again, up until the time that Brian died, I think everything was just going great. Again, they never did the same thing twice or over again. They were always looking for the next,
you could say the first 4 albums are repetitive in some way, but they're just so good, even though they're, little 3-minute love song, but they're just so powerful. I've always loved each phase of them.
The interesting thing about the Beatles, which so many other bands tried to do and failed miserably, is the Beatles were able to evolve without ever losing themselves. Every version of the Beatles, as they evolve, they're still being true to themselves.
Yeah.
And so many bands are like, oh, we're going to evolve and impress people. And they end up not listening to themselves and just trying to impress other people with their quote unquote evolution. And they end up falling on their ass.
Yeah. And one of the first casualties was the Stones doing Satanic Majesties.
Satanic Majesties, yeah, which is like Satanic Majesties makes Magical Mystery Tour look like Sgt. Pepper. That's just a horrendous album. Although you got a soft spot for it in your heart now.
Yeah, I mean, there's 10 songs on there, and 7 of them are still. I can still listen to. Set, there's 3 that are just, what are you doing?
But it's such an obvious, now we're gonna do our Sgt. Pepper, let's take a bunch of acid and just ramble for 60 minutes.
And poor Keith going, what the fuck are we doing?
I know.
But I think without falling so hard like they did,
you wouldn't have the Grand Slam,
you wouldn't have Beggar's Banquet, but
and Sticky Fingers and Exile and what was the other one of the Grand Slam? Let It Bleed.
Let It Bleed.
Yeah.
Get Your Ya. Just amazing.
But,
well, you're going to love our Stones episode, folks. We're huge Stones fans.
Nice. Yeah, I think the 4 of them, the fact that there were 4 of them, just to go back to Elvis, he only had himself.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have any, other than the sycophants around him, right? He didn't have any equal to bounce ideas back and forth with, and I think that was part of the problem as well with him.
Yeah.
I felt like the Beatles were the first band where it was 4 of them and not just a guy and his band, backup. I just don't think before them, you always had one guy and somebody,
Yep. That was and that served as a template for so many bands afterwards,
Oh
yeah. All right, so that's the Beatles part 2. We're going to call this episode Ticket to Ride, and stay tuned. Next week we'll cap it all off with the Beatles part 3, post Brian Epstein era. Talk about some
71.
Talk about some dark shit, some Charles Manson, and all the rest of it. So get ready. All right, peace out, motherfuckers.
Deuces.
Thanks again, guys. Had a great time.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.